Let's get to the news. To kick things off this week, we have to start by talking about Georgi Meloni. This is the new or the incoming prime minister of Italy. She's a conservative firebrand, nationalist, God first, family-oriented woman. In fact, the first woman to win the prime minister seat in Italy. And you'd think that she would have been celebrated for being the first female prime minister of Italy, but instead she has been somewhat reviled, actually, in the mainstream news on account of her being very conservative. So her motto is really God, country, and family, and that really ticked off the leftists and the sort of globalist media organizational complex. And there's an interesting kind of twist of fate after she won the prime minister seat. A video of hers from 2019 from a speech she had delivered, really championing her values. It got actually removed from YouTube. So here we have YouTube removes incoming Italian Prime Minister Meloni's passionate speech on family breakdown. And it says here, as of Wednesday, the platform described the video, leaving a notice this video has been removed for violating YouTube's community guidelines. There's a couple other copies of the video floating around. The video went viral after her coalition won 44% of the Italian electorate. And it says YouTube has a lot of different, rules that can restrict videos. But it says here at the bottom, the company did not specify which rule Meloni's speech broke. So very, very fascinating kind of example of fascism here. This is Exhibit 1001 that we've seen over the past couple of years. Outright just like government to big tech collusion to remove a political opponent from a mainstream platform for no reason, really, just to be able to silence their opposition. So I thought it would be interesting to take a look just for a moment at this group here that Meloni is a part of. So she is a part of this group called the Brothers of Italy, and that was her kind of right-wing party in Italy, and it's really anti-progressive. And I wanted to just take a look at a couple of their platform statements here, because I think it's really very interesting that they branded this lady Meloni as being a far right extremist. They called her a fascist, et cetera, et cetera. And in my opinion, she's somewhere between a moderate and a sort of a center right conservative. But let's just take a look at some of these popular kind of views straight from the her party website here. So Brothers of Italy Party, you can see where they stand on policy positions, and this is ordered by kind of ranking based on how important it is to Italians. So number one, should employers be required to pay men and women the same salary for the job? Her position is yes. Okay, that seems like a moderate position to me. What is your stance on abortion? Pro-choice, but banned after the first 3 months. Okay, that's definitely not far right. So far right would be like no abortion at all, right? Far left would be like abortion up to the birth, basically. And so this seems to be at least somewhat moderate here, saying you can get an abortion, but not after 3 months. Maybe center right, but it's in that range. Should the government increase environmental regulations on businesses to reduce carbon emissions? Yes. So this is definitely not a right-wing position, right? More regulation to reduce carbon emissions. That's basically a left-wing talking point. But she says provide more incentives for alternative energy production. So yes, and right. Should terminally ill patients be allowed to end their lives via assisted suicide? She says no. Okay. I would argue this is a right-wing position. This one. Generally speaking, the left is more in favor of assisted suicide. Do you support the legalization of same-sex marriage? No. That's also a right-wing position. Should gay couples have the same adoption rights as straight couples? No. So this would also be a right-wing position. Should Italy withdraw from the EU? She says no. Okay, so she's not necessarily a separatist, or she's not a, let's say, a super nationalist that just wants to cut herself off from the EU. But she also says, hey, we should do some renegotiation. So a la Donald Trump, there should be some terms and conditions for our membership in the EU around monetary contributions as well as migration security. Okay, seems fair and reasonable. I would take this as more of a moderate position, possibly center right. And then should a politician who's formerly convicted of a crime be allowed to run for office? She says no. I don't know if this is a left wing or a right wing one. She's pretty like, hey, you can't run for office if you're convicted of a crime. And she even goes as far as to say investigations. So I'm not sure if I consider that right wing or left wing. Just a couple more. Should the government be able to monitor phone calls and emails? She says no. And enact legislation preventing government surveillance of citizen communications. Nice. I like it. So this is definitely a right-wing position nowadays. Like maybe 15 years ago, that this would have been more of a left-wing position here in the States. So like, you know, the whole Patriot Act and like the NSA and the security state, like spying on Americans, that would have been more of a left-wing position. But nowadays, it's more of a right-wing position. Support for the death penalty, yes. Okay, that one's definitely right-wing as well. And then should the government provide tax incentives to private companies to keep jobs in the country? So she's saying yes. That is a good one. That's somewhere between moderate and like center right nowadays. So there you go. And then should businesses be required to have women on their board of directors? She says no. Basically free market oriented here. You know, not saying like forced diversity in her view. So I'll pause there. There's a bunch more. Feel free to check it out in your own kind of time. But basically, I take all these positions and I'm like, she's somewhere, I would say like center right. Somewhere center right. Definitely not a far right person or kind of a neo-Nazi as they've been painting her. And then I just wanted to kind of show just like the first 20 seconds or so of her speech that went viral. So this thing got like 7 million plus views within 24 hours last week. And now it's up here to like 21 million views, at least on Twitter. I think the main video has gotten removed from YouTube. I haven't been able to see it. But let's just read the first 20 seconds or so of this. This is about what we are doing here today, she says. Why is the family an enemy? Why is the family so frightening? There's a single answer to all these questions. Because it defines us. Because it is our identity. Because everything that defines us is now an enemy. For those who would like us to no longer have an identity. And to simply be perfect consumer slaves. So that sounds like left wing. And so they attack national identity. They attack religious identity. They attack gender identity. And they attack family identity. So I'm going to pause it there. So it's an attack on identity. Very, very powerful speech. Encourage kind of the full checking out kind of on your own time here. But I'm going to move this to a strong S. A lot of Americans, a lot of the Western world, and a lot of right-wing people on sort of the American political side, you know, Ted Cruz, Carrie Lake and others have really kind of been resharing that video and making her go kind of super viral here. And that type of messaging, that coherent, concise, very powerful messaging is truly a breath of fresh air. And people like her are kind of changing the narrative here in the States. So next up, we have to talk about Jordan Peterson. So Jordan Peterson went viral this past week or so during an interview that he had with Piers Morgan. So it says here, Jordan Peterson holds back tears responding to Olivia Wilde incel jibe. So basically some woman named Olivia Wilde is making a movie. She based one of the bad guy characters off of Jordan Peterson. And so Piers Morgan basically asked Jordan about this. He said, when pressed by Morgan on Piers Morgan Uncensored, Peterson initially remained stone-faced when he was asked whether he was, in fact, the intellectual hero for incels. Incels mean involuntary celibates, so men who are not sexually active. Sure, why not, he says after a pause. You know, people have been after me for a long time because I've been speaking to disaffected young men. Now, what a terrible thing to do that is, Peterson said wryly. I thought the marginalized were supposed to have a voice. And he says, look, it's very difficult to understand how demoralized people are. And certainly many young men are in that category, and they get casual insults. These incels, what does that even mean? I'll pause there, but it was a huge and very powerful moment that really gets to the heart of Jordan Peterson. It's so great to see him after all these years of saying basically the same thing in so many different ways to so many different audiences, still have the same heart of gold that he used to have. And like back in my day when I was like definitely more liberal, they used to be this statement that said, if you're not a liberal by the age of 20, you have no heart. And if you're not a conservative by the age of 30, you have no brain. And that used to be true back in my day. Like we used to basically say, hey, have a heart, give to the immigrant, we should, give money to other nations and, allow women to do whatever they want to. And in terms of their bodies and such, I was very much like, hey, if you disagree with me, you're just lacking in compassion. And what a long way like we've come as a culture now. So Jordan Peterson and the right is by and large nowadays far more compassionate, and the left is basically the mean-spirited, very cruel actually side when it comes to men in particular. There's a real hatred, kind of a misandry these days. There's a complete lack of compassion and empathy for men, which is a double-edged sword. It's bad for everybody. It's bad for men and it's bad for women. Overall, society does not benefit when men are struggling and suffering as they are now in so many ways, and there's no voice to represent them. And if you do represent them, you're branded an incel and all the bad stuff that Jordan Peterson has been labeled. I think he got labeled as the Red Skull, which is like a Nazi pictogram. So very tragic stuff. Good to see that he still stayed on the path, as it were. Okay, so next up, we have to speak a little bit about this Coast Guard situation. So, as you may know, Hurricane Ian hit Florida this past week, and they've been doing their best to kind of mitigate damage, rescue people, give resources to local governments, rebuild, all these different things, right? Really interesting story. So it says here from Breitbart, Biden thanks Coast Guard rescue swimmer that he's kicking out over the vaccine mandate. So President Joe Biden on Friday personally called to thank a Coast Guard rescue swimmer who was facing discharge over Biden's vaccine mandate for saving people's lives during Hurricane Ian. So the White House was pretty proud of this. They publicized the call in a press release. Biden bragged about it, said how proud he was and thankful for all the work that he and his coasties are doing to save lives. And the White House press release said he thanked Loesch, who's a Coast Guard member, and Lieutenant Commander Christopher Hooper for the heroic work that they and their Coast Guard colleagues have performed during search and rescue operations in response to Hurricane Ian. So thank you so much for saving lives, basically. And it says here, despite Biden thanking Loesch for saving people's lives, Loesch is due to be kicked out from the U.S. Coast Guard in 30 to 60 days due to Biden's own vaccine mandate that all members of the U.S. Armed Forces be fully vaccinated, Loesch told Breitbart on Saturday. So Loesch had submitted a religious request accommodation as well as an appeal, but both were denied, according to Loesch. If I had asked any of the people I saved yesterday if they wanted to come with me, even though I am unvaccinated, every single one of them would have said yes, he said. Loesch personally pulled, get this, like visualize this for a moment. He personally pulled out a disabled woman and her husband who were trapped in their back bedroom when a couch jammed the doorway. He kicked through a wall in order to free them. And then once they were freed, he went back to get their wheelchair, securing it to his own body as he was hoisted up by a Coast Guard helicopter. And then he even rescued several dogs and cats. Holy shit. This dude's like a literal hero. And look at this. Not only is he a hero, but he's a class act. It's Loesch said he did not want to bring up his pending charges to Biden, who was essentially his commander-in-chief, and ruin the call. That's crazy. That's crazy. That's like humility at a level that I couldn't even do. It just sucks that he thanked me, yet the vaccine mandate is what's kicking me out, he said. I just love my job and I'm really good at it. It sucks. I feel like this is the job that I was born to do. Unbelievable. Absolute disgrace. We are facing human rights abuses in this day and age like never seen before. This is satire to the highest level, and it's crazy. Like going back to the Jordan Peterson thing, it's like this society rewards subservience by men, not sacrifice, right? Like, you know, Biden wants to use this guy Loesch for some good PR to say how on the ball he is, and you know, look how good a job I'm doing, helping out and encouraging people. But when it comes to actually showing any level of care or concern for this individual, he's like, fuck these people. I don't care about this individual, his life, his family, his friends, his community. Forget about him. He's of no value to me. He's gonna chew you up. He's gonna spit you out. You know, he's gonna use you to tout and virtue signal. Tout his own horn, and then when he's done with you, he's gonna kick you to the curb. This is the Black Widow syndrome. You know, give me what you have, little male, and then I'm gonna eat you. I'm gonna eat you because you're of no value to me or to anybody else afterwards. He's gonna chew you up and spit you out. Just absolutely disgusting. These people hate you. These people hate you, and they'll send you to your death to advance their interests. Up to and including military conscription, by the way. So there's some interesting stuff happening right now where the Army, restricted duty pay and benefits for like 60,000 unvaccinated guards and reservists. And then just like I think yesterday, today's the 2nd, just yesterday they fell 25% short on their recruiting efforts. Okay. Cause and effect. Where are we going to be in 2 years? Where are we going to be in 5 years? And then there's some interesting stuff, right? Because when you contextualize this, this is from Jack Posobiec. He says, the only way Biden could effectively commit to defending Taiwan with recruitment numbers in free fall is a nationwide military draft. So why is this relevant? So Russia just brought out something like 300,000 reservists and then moved to military conscription. So what happens, right, if a nuclear war does break out and the war is not over, quickly? Is it unreasonable to think that with, recruitment numbers in free fall that we can go to calling up reservists? And then once we call them, if the war is still not over, is it unreasonable to think that they can bring back the draft? And suddenly we'll have like Vietnam War, a bunch of draft dodgers all over the place, running and hiding and locking up in their homes with their weapons to try to protect themselves. Who knows? But crazy situation that we're in. This is going to be an S tier for me as well. Not because this U.S. Coast Guard situation is super well known. That's not really the case. Even though Hurricane Ian is national news, it's more so just the irony of it all. The irony and the symbolism of where we are and the madness that is happening. And this is in the context of, by the way, places like Canada and New Zealand loosening up their sort of COVID restrictions and requirement, but on the other hand, we have, New York going full crazy, firing people who are essential public workers. And now, obviously the military being purged, as it was, to get all the ideologues who agree with him in, and all the ideologues who disagree with him out, the people who actually stand up on some level of principle. Okay. So next up, we have to talk about this Netflix situation. So Netflix was kind of in the news this past week because the Jeffrey Dahmer series came out, and there was an LGBTQ tag on it, and that got basically the gay community really upset. So Netflix, in response to that, they removed the LGBTQ tag from the Dahmer series due to that backlash from viewers. Pretty big story. I thought it was an interesting kind of show of strength, if you would, by kind of the gay lobby, as it were. And more recently, the kind of Planned Parenthood, let's say pro-abortion group, they basically complained about this other show on Netflix right now called the Blonde biopic about Marilyn Monroe. It was slandered as being anti-abortion for portraying grief of the pregnancy termination. So they have a pretty accurate description of Marilyn Monroe from a book that was written, I guess, in 2000, that shows her basically having grief over a previous abortion that she had. And it was I guess, taboo right now in 2022 to state the fact that women can have grief over an abortion and that it's not something to be cheered. So Planned Parenthood sort of sent a naughty letter for promoting misinformation. So very, very strong kind of leftist lobbying happening this week on the Netflix front. And I'm actually reminded of a couple years ago, this Cuties show on Netflix. So there was an interesting kind of saga in which this show about basically 12-year-old children being very inappropriate drew some controversy. And so what happened was there was some level of, I would say, suppression in response to it. The show, I don't think, got removed from the platform altogether, but maybe in just select markets, or maybe they, changed the algorithm. So some light response to it. So it says Netflix scrambled internally to suppress a controversial movie from the search results. So this is kind of harkening back to that. It's like, the left is kind of flexing its muscle here, just as the right kind of flexed its muscle, I guess a year or two ago, with respect to cuties. And this also reveals kind of an interesting kind of aspect of how the left and right sees the world. The left is like identity driven. It's like, I'm a woman, therefore abortion. I am a gay person, therefore I, am in favor of gay people being viewed in a positive light on the big screen. Whereas the right is more like more moral driven and justice driven. And for them, the sexualization of these, young people was unacceptable, enough for them to cancel their subscriptions and make a big fuss about it for good reason. So interesting kind of peer into the motivations of these two groups. Between the left and the right. So overall, I'm going to move this one to an A tier. Got a lot of normies kind of, I would say, attention, and kind of shows the kind of where we are from a cultural standpoint for the left to be able to make the sway that they did in this one. Okay, so next up, we have to talk about Trevor Noah, who abruptly quits Comedy Central's Daily Show this past week. And I think there's something that's being suppressed here. And this is compliments of ABL, Anthony Brian Logan. So shout out to him for the scoop here. The takeaway here is that, so he took over the Daily Show back in the day, 2015? When he took over, Jon Stewart's Daily Show was averaging 1.3 million viewers per night. But Noah was most recently averaging 363,000 viewers per night. That is about a 1 million viewership drop over the past 7 years. That is a failure. That is an F-. That's really, really bad. He wasn't fired, apparently. He just quit the show. But the show was doing really, really poorly, which is crazy. And this actually came on the heels of Don Lemon, or I guess Don Lemon, being booted from the primetime slot on CNN this past week or so. So there's an interesting kind of change right now happening in the media landscape. The old media, sort of legacy media, is fading away into irrelevancy, and it's becoming more severe, both as the economy tanks, as well as people's preferences tank, especially in this sort of quote-unquote post-Trump environment, where they can only be fed so much by the rage machine, right? Without Trump. So I'm going to move this one to a B tier. Good to see legacy media continuing to take its kind of death gasps, and some of the alternative media platforms continuing to rise up. And then lastly, we have to talk about Lizzo, just in passing here, because this also really stirred the pot culturally this past week. And, so basically she was given a concert. She got invited by the Library of Congress to play James Madison Flute. He had like a glass or a crystal flute, and people were really upset about it. I don't think it was because Lizzo did it, but it was because she did it while being almost nude and twerking in front of the audience. So the right is basically saying that's a desecration of American history. And the left is saying, get over it. You didn't even know the glass flute existed, which is also true, by the way. So I think two things can be true at once, as Ben Shapiro likes to say, right? One is, the positive is like millions of people who you don't really pay attention to politics and all that, saw something and learned something about history as a result of this whole story. I, for one, didn't know that there was a crystal flute in the Library of Congress owned by James Madison. That's news to me, right? And so I'm sure millions of others who didn't know that as well, they may want to do a little research, do a little reading, have an interest in history. Now, on the other hand, that it can be a complete disrespect and disregard and desecration of American history. And like fundamentally, it just goes to show that really nothing is sacred nowadays, particularly within this sort of left-wing narrative. Nothing is sacred but the narrative, by the way. Thou shalt adhere to whatever leftist dogma there is, and beyond that, there is no other thing sacred. So I think two things can be true at once on this. So with all that, I'm going to move this one to C tier. Thanks for listening to today's rundown. If you liked what you heard, please comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.